Sunday Goddess Deep Dive, Sedna. My name is Megan. I am a feminist Hellenistic astrology student. So if you are interested in feminism and Hellenistic astrology and goddess mythology, you are in the right place. Every Sunday we do a deep dive into some of the myths and the goddesses that we work with on the channel. And today we are going to talk about Sedna, the Inuit sea woman. So there is a boat in a storm, and the man in it has worked out that the boat is too heavy. There is one other person on board. She is the daughter. He lifts her over the side, and when she gets both hands onto the edge of the boat and is holding on, he takes out a knife and cuts her fingers off. First at the top joint, and then at the second, and then at the knuckle. She goes down into the water. Her fingers go down after her, and on the way down, they turn into the seals and the walruses and the whales. So that everything that people eat from day to day came out of that woman's hand that a man cut off. This is the story of Sedna. She is Inuit. She is the most powerful being in the Inuit world, and she lives at the bottom of the Arctic Ocean, holding every animal that anyone eats. So the father in the story is worth slowing down on just for a second, just because he is doing arithmetic. The weather is coming, the boat will not hold what is in it, and he goes through the contents and lands on the one item that he sees can be removed. So nothing saying that he hated her. In most versions, he had just come to fetch her from a bad marriage. He killed the husband who was starving her. He is on that water because he went to get her, so rescue and disposal happen on the same trip, in the same weather, and at his hands. So that's why this story is not about a bad father, and why it won't only stay inside of one family. Every woman with a complicated relationship with her own father knows that there is love in it somewhere. But what she also knows is the moment that the sum was done, the arithmetic was done, she was the answer. So she goes by different names depending on what coast you're standing on. Among the Netsilik, she is Nuliayuk. And in North Baffin, she's Takanaluk. In Greenland, she is Sasuma Arna, the woman of the deep, and she is also Arknaska Taliayuk. Sedna is one form among many, and it happens to be the one that traveled south and got printed in all the books by people who were not Inuit. We'll come back to that. Excuse me. She is not a goddess in the Greek sense of sitting on a mountain with a portfolio and a temper. Inuit cosmology does not run on a pantheon of personalities who marry each other and hold grudges. It runs on relationships and obligations between people and animals, and she is the one at the center of the most important. She holds the sea mammals. Whether people eat depends on her. So notice which direction is sacred here, because in most mythologies that got taught in European schools, the divine is up. Sky Father, throne in the clouds, heaven overhead. In the Arctic, the most powerful being in the land of the dead are both underneath water. Food comes from down there, and the dead go down there. So down is where the power is. That single inversion tells you that these stories were made by people who were paying attention to their actual conditions instead of importing someone else's diagram of a universe. Nor is she decorative. In a place where a failed hunt means that people don't eat, a story about who controls the animals isn't entertainment, it's a working theory of how the world stayed fed and what breaks the feeding. As I said, my name is Megan. I'm a feminist Hellenistic astrology student. I offer interpretations through the lens of feminism. If that resonates, I'm thrilled that you are here. Please do all the things like follow, subscribe, hype, notifications, all the stuff. And I would love to read for you. So please come for a reading. If you haven't come for a reading, please come for a reading. I love doing readings. I love meeting you. I love seeing your chart. I love seeing how your chart how your life has manifested, reflecting your chart. And I also love looking at what we can create from here. So maybe you have a birthday coming up and you want a solar return reading. What is your year about? Those are super fun. General readings, pretty much anything else. Whatever you want to talk about. If you want to talk about the transits that are happening right now and understand them better. Maybe you want to talk about the goddesses and the asteroids and Black Moon Lilith and where you find the goddesses and the asteroids in your life and how to then bring down the mythology. Maybe you want to talk about your birth chart and what was happening the moment that you were born, and maybe see it from a different perspective that you have never seen before. If you think you have a difficult birth chart, we should talk. If you think that, and you've heard that you have some bad placements, quote unquote, then we should talk. I'm pretty game for whatever you want to look at with regards to your chart, because I want to see as many charts as I can, and because I love the different kinds of conversations that I get to have with all of you. And if you have never done any of this before and you're not even sure like what a natal chart is, I would be so honored to work with you and be like the first experience, the first time. I love it when you guys do that. And then I have a Lilith reading, which could also be interesting. It's taking Black Moon Lilith and looking at her as a source of power, and then also looking at the lots and how the lots really, how we can access what is innate in us, our creativity, our passion, our sparks, our life, the spirit, the fortune, the luck, all of those things. How do we activate those? And which then leads to wealth. And you can find everything you need down below, or send money through Buy Me a Coffee. Join a membership through Buy Me a Coffee. Buy me a Sprite, Diet Sprite, Sprite Zero, excuse me. I would love all of those things. Okay, how she got to the bottom of the sea. So let's start with the world that she was living in. So there's a camp on the coast, and it's a handful of families, and everyone is related to everyone, living on what the water gives up. So seal is in the cold months, fish and birds and caribou are when the season turns, and then long stretches where the food is whatever was put by. The lamp burns seal oil. The boots are sewn from seal skin with a seam that has to be watertight or the foot inside of it freezes. There's no market, there's no store, there's no way to buy your way out of a bad winter, there's no Amazon. Everything comes out of the water, and everything is made by hand. So in a camp like that, a marriage is a very public matter between two people who like each other. And it's an arrangement between families, and it settles who hunts with whom and who is owed meat and who will be fed. A young woman of marriageable age is the hinge that the whole arrangement is on. So men come, her father hears them out, the families work it through, and this woman said no to each of them, all of them. So the stories don't really say why, and none of them ask why. What they agree on is that it went on long enough to be a problem. Sedna saying no. She was of an age, and the men kept coming, and she kept turning them down. And a household in that world cannot go on indefinitely feeding a growing daughter who will not enter into marriage that everyone else's security is built out of. Her father was getting impatient in a way that everyone around them could have understood. And then a stranger came. He was dressed well, better than anyone from around there. In some tellings, he wears fine skins and ivory at his belt. And in some, he keeps his hood up and his face is hidden the whole time that he talks. He tells her what she will have if she comes with him. She will have a house. She will have skins to lie on. She will have a lamp burning through the winter. She will have meat and never any shortage of it, because he is that kind of provider. He does not haggle with her father over caribou hides. He speaks to her. And she goes. In some stories, her father sends her worn out with the whole business, and in some, she chooses it, and the choosing is hers because she's not tricked into something by her father's mistake. She hears the promise of a life that is bigger than the one on offer at home, which is what she's been refusing all along, and she gets into the boat and she goes with him. He takes her a long way out past the ground that anyone from her camp would hunt, out to a rock in the open sea with nothing on it. But there is no house. There is a nest, built of twigs and old skins and stone, in the wind, and her husband, who is not actually a man, but is a bird in a man's shape, and out there he stops bothering with the shape. He brings her fish, not seal, not caribou, not anything that a person from the coast would call food, but cold fish, and not much of it. And the same day, and the same the next day, and the same the next day. The wind never stops. The stone does not get warmer. The other birds are all around, and she cannot understand anything that they're saying. And she is there for a long time. In most stories, the better part of a year. And what she does is she calls. She sings out across the water towards the coast over and over for her father to come and get her. And there is a whole strand of Inuit song and lament that sits underneath the part of this story, women's songs sent across the water, and that this is a woman on a rock singing the same line at the horizon throughout a winter. Eventually he hears it, or he hears of it, and he comes. And he waits until the bird husband is out over the water hunting, and then he lands, and then he takes her, and he puts her in the boat, and he starts for the coast. And in stories, some stories, he kills the husband first. He's not sneaking away. He goes out on open water in a skin boat, and he kills the creature that took his daughter, and then he loads her in and turns for home. And they are hours out, and the birds come. And the bird husband's people find out what has been done, and they come after the boat, low over the water, and they beat their wings until the sea works up under them. The swell rises, and the boat starts taking water, and the coast is nowhere near. And her father, in a boat that is about to go down, with a storm on top of him, and his daughter in the bottom of it, goes through what is on board. He picks her up and he puts her over the side. She gets her hands on the edge of the boat and holds on. Her weight is on her fingers, and the boat is dipping towards the water with her hanging off of it. And so he takes out his knife and he cuts her fingers off. The first joints, but she's still holding on with what is left, and so he cuts again and again. In some stories, the joints go into the water in 3 sets, and in the first set become the seals, and the second become the walruses, and the third become the whales. And then she goes down, and she keeps going down, and she does not stop going down until she reaches the bottom, and that is where she has been ever since. Now look at the shape of the life she had before her storm ever started. She would not take the arrangement that her family put in front of her. So she took a promise from a stranger instead, and it was a lie, and she was left on a rock. Then a man came out and killed for her and put her in his boat. The bird wanted a wife, the father wanted his daughter back, and then he wanted to live. Every man in the story is inside a project of his own, and she's inside all of their projects. But at no point does anyone ask her what she wants, including the people telling the story. And hold on, that he did come for her. He heard her singing across the water, and he went out on the dangerous open sea and killed to bring her home. By his own reckoning, he was the good one, and by any reckoning, he was the only person who came. And then the weather turned, and the thing that he had gone out to rescue was the thing that he could most easily do without. A man can love you and come for you, and kill for you, and still kill you over the side when the weight has to be reduced. In the 1920s, on the Arctic coast, Netsilik elders told a different version of how she got down there, and I like it. I want to share it with you. In that telling, Nuliayuk, and she is an orphan girl that no one wanted. She had no parents to speak for her, and she was fed last, and she was sheltered worst, the way that a camp treats a child who belongs to no one. When the people moved across the water, they did not take her with. They put her over the side. She got her hands on the edge of the raft and held on, and someone took an axe and chopped her fingers off, and she went down and became the woman who holds every animal in the sea. This one, there's no father. There's no single villain. There's no knife. There's no abusive husband. There's no storm to explain anyone's decision. There is a group of ordinary people who are cold and busy and moving house. And they are doing a sum about who is surplus, and the sun comes out the same way it always does, right? And then all of them, every one of them, ate for the rest of their lives from what she became. So both versions are told. Both are Inuit. Having both of them, I think, is interesting because between them, they cover the two ways that a woman gets out. Sometimes it's one person with a knife and a face that you know, and sometimes it's a camp or a process or a set of arrangements that no one really decided, but everyone went along with. The second one is harder to talk about because there's no one to be angry at. Everyone was busy. Everyone had reasons, and the girl went into the water anyway. But look at what she was before they moved. She wasn't a princess. She wasn't a beauty. She wasn't a chief's daughter. She was an orphan, which in that world meant someone with no one obliged to her. The child who gets the worst of the meat and sleeps furthest from the lamp, not because anyone is cruel, but because no one is obligated to her. Then the camp made the most powerful thing in their cosmos exactly out of that child. So they could have told the story where the sea is held by a hunter or a father or an ancestor was standing, but they put the whole food supply of the entire world into the hands of a girl that they had thrown away. And then they organized their religious life around the fact that they now had to keep her happy. It's an honest piece of self-assessment in mythology, and it says we did this, we continue to do this, and the thing we did it to holds us alive. Now, back to the father. So what never happens in any version, no one ever says that the boat is too heavy for the hunting gear. No one throws the harpoons over. Nobody suggests that the largest body aboard, the one holding the knife, might be what the water can't hold. The list of things that could be removed has one item on it, and the one item on it was that one before the weather even turned. The storm didn't produce the decision. The storm gave the decision an occasion, and she was always extra. This is the whole thing about getting removed from things, being removed from things. It works the same in the boat as it does in a budget. The cut is presented as forced by conditions. Times are hard, the numbers don't work, something has to give, and then, without anyone appearing to choose, the sum thing turns out to be a woman. If the sum only ever comes out one way, it was not a sum, it was a preference pretending to be a sum. And you can watch a state do this in the open. In Ireland from 1924, a woman in permanent civil service post was required to resign when she married. It was written down, it ran for nearly 50 years, and in each of the 3 years before it fell, about 700 women were made to leave their jobs because they had gotten married. The reasoning offered was unemployment, work was scarce, and so paid work should stay in men's hands. The Netherlands did the same thing from 1904 and did not stop until 1957. 2 countries, 2 economies, 2 sets of officials, and both of them, the item that came down was the married woman. She's not thrown over because she's worthless. She's thrown over because she's flexible. She is the one whose removal is survivable for everyone else, and she's disposable. Now the part that makes the story different from every other story about a woman getting hurt. He does not cut her throat. He cuts her fingers. So in a place where survival is made by hand, that is the part that sews the waterproof seam in the boot, right? That is the part that guts the fish. That's the part that holds the line. That's the part that works the skin soft. That's the part that braids the hair. That's the part that holds the child. So he takes the making off of her. Everything that she would need to survive, he removes. But what he does not take, each joint goes into the water, it becomes an animal, and those animals are the food supply of a people for the rest of time. Everything that anyone eats came off of her hands. The seal that makes the boots, the walrus that makes the line, the whale that feeds the whole camp through a bad winter, all of it is her. Every meal that anyone has ever eaten in that world is her hands still working from the bottom of the sea that she was thrown out of. And there's a version of this in most of our lives. The way that a family does Christmas is someone's design. The thing that works at that job, the process that everyone follows, the way of doing it that survived restructures and reorgs, the thing that was invented by a woman who's no longer there, the person who taught the person who's now considered the expert, right? The seam that holds is hers, and the boot being worn by everyone. I don't think this is about credit. Credit is something that's smaller than what's going on here. What we're talking about is that the world is being fed by something that was taken off of a woman, and that the eating goes on without a thought, and the abundance continues without a thought. It didn't stop being hers when it went into the water. So the story doesn't end at the bottom of the sea with a dead girl. It ends with the most powerful being in the world down there. But wait, there's more. The animals live in her hair, and her hair is very long, and it is loose in the water, and the seals and the whales and the fish move through her hair. And when people keep their side of things, treating the animals with respect and wasting nothing and observing what is required after a kill, her hair stays loose, and the animals swim out to the hunters, and everyone eats. When people break those obligations, her hair tangles. Every broken one snarls it further, and the animals cannot get out. In the Netsilik story, she shuts them in the basin under her lamp. The hunting fails, the boats come back empty, and people go hungry. And she cannot fix it because she doesn't have fingers. So the mats in her hair are made of what other people did, and the one person who cannot untangle them is her. The first thing about that is the theory of consequence instead of the theory of punishment. She's not up there deciding to teach anyone a lesson. Break the relationship and the food stops, right? That's closer to ecology than to morality, and the harm arrives at the people who have caused it by way of the person that they already harmed. She withholds because she's withholding the only thing a body in her condition can still do. Everything else was taken. She cannot make, she cannot mend, she cannot leave, she cannot comb. She can hold. And so she does. She holds. And then the world stops. And everybody has to reckon with her. So it looks like not doing the thing, not making the call that keeps everything running, going quiet in a way that's not soaking, it's not strategy, it's just the bandwidth that is left when everything else has been removed. It gets called difficult, it gets called passive aggressive, And it's not either. It's the last piece of bandwidth of something that has been taken apart, piece by piece by piece. So when the hunting failed, someone had to go down. So the angakkuq, the shaman, would go into a trance and travel to the bottom of the sea. And this was a very serious thing, and it was very dangerous. The route down was guarded, and there was a passage to get through. There was a dog. In some stories, her father is there. There are obstacles that can kill you. Inuit other elders interviewed Nunavut in the 1990s and described the descent in detail, including the sound of the angakkuq going down, because this was serious for them. It was a technique with a method, and people had seen it done. When he gets there, what he does is comb her hair. He takes out the mats with her fingers, and the fingers that she does not have. And while he does it, he listens. And he tells her what the people have done. And the confession travels back up as well. When he returns, the community would say out loud what they had broken, and they would put it right. So how about this, right? In the shape, a person goes to a holy place and addresses something above them and asks to be relieved. And the relief is granted, or the relief is withheld by a power with no injuries, and it is bestowed upon them, right? Here, the direction is down. The power has a body that has been damaged. It's disabled. And the ritual centers on the physical contact with the part of her that cannot be maintained without help. It is closer to sitting with someone and doing their hair than it is to prayer. It's very intimate, and it takes time, and it cannot be done at a distance or delegated or paid for. And it only works in one direction. The angakkuq does not go down to persuade her that things are not as bad as she thinks. He does not go down to check whether she is being fair. He goes down because the fault is at his end, and he knows it. And the trip is the proof that his people know it too. Someone has to be prepared to travel a very long way, at risk, past a dog and past obstacles, to sit in the dark with a woman who was cut and put their hands in her hair. It's the price to eat, and they have been paying it for centuries. Nobody asks her to forgive her father. Nobody asks her to see the situation from the boat's point of view. Nobody suggests that being dismembered was the beginning of her journey and she should think positive and be grateful, or that she should sit with the gift in it, or that her anger is now the real obstacle and there's shadow work to be done. There's no version of the story where the fix is Sedna working on herself. The fix is that someone comes down to where she is, does with their hands the thing that she cannot do with hers, tells the truth about what has been done, and then the people up top change their behavior. That's the ritual. Presence, hands, truth, and change. She's not waiting to be strong enough to comb it herself. She's not healing her wound. That is a sentence to carry out. The entire spiritual process of the Arctic people was built around the understanding that some tangles are not yours to untangle alone. And the correct response to a woman who was cut is not to hand her a koam. Now let's look at what happens to her on the way south. Sprite 0. The first wrong telling makes her a vain girl. She refused all of her suitors. She was too proud. She went off with a handsome stranger because she was fooled by his coat. Everything that follows is the consequence of a girl who thought too well of herself. This is the one that's in children's books, trying to teach morality. It converts a story about disposal into a story about a girl who should have settled. The second one turns her into a monster. She is a hag at the bottom of the sea. She's vengeful and wrathful and starving people out of spite. And the shaman is the hero who has to master her. That version keeps every event and moves all the responsibility off. The people who broke the obligations vanish, and the angry woman is what is wrong with the world. The third is the closest to home for anyone in spiritual or astrological circles, and it is the New Age version. In it, she becomes the wounded feminine, the goddess of surrender and trust and letting go. And the moral is about releasing what no longer serves you. The fingers become a metaphor for attachment. The descent becomes personal growth and an opportunity to heal. And every specific obligation, every rule about what you owe the animal you killed is quietly dropped, because those rules make demands on the listener. And the market for this does not want demands. What all three have in common is that they take the image and leave the structure. A dismembered woman at the bottom of the sea, that's a picture. That's interesting. The picture travels. What does not travel is the part where a whole people is organized, their eating, their hunting, their ethics, and their entire ritual life around obligations to the animals and to her. And the part where the failure of the hunt is diagnosed as something that the community did, not something that she does. So the story about a woman who's cut into pieces so that other people could eat has itself been cut into pieces so that other people can use it. And it's the same operation performed over and over and over again, once inside the story and once on the story. On the 14th of November, 2003, at Palomar Observatory in California, 3 astronomers found something further out than anything ever known. Mike Brown, Chad Trulio, and David Rabinowitz had a survey running, and the object turned at roughly 90 times the distance from the sun to the Earth. It has the longest reach of anything of its kind that we can see. At its closest, it is about 76 times the Earth's distance from the sun. At its furthest, around 937, and one full trip takes it something like 11,400 years. Brown proposed that it be called Sedna. His reasoning, his own words, on his own website at the time, was that this was the coldest and the most distant place known, so it was fitting to honor the Inuit goddess of the sea, who is thought to live at the bottom of the ocean. He also suggested the International Astronomical Union that everything else found out there be called after figures from Arctic mythologies. The name was made official in September 2004. So the first is that he picked an Arctic name, partly because he thought the Inuit were the polar people closest to his home, but that's not correct. The second is that he chose it partly because English speakers would find it easier to say. He had previously worked on an object called Quar from the Tongva people whose land Los Angeles sits on, and people struggled with it. So one of the qualifications for carrying an Inuit goddess into the sky was that her name went easily into the American mouth. And then this. Saturn already had a moon called Sayonark, approved the year before, which was another one of her names. He did not know that. He found out because an indigenous newspaper telephoned him to ask about the name that he had chosen and mentioned it. The astronomer had to be told by indigenous journalists what the name he had chosen meant and where else it already was being used. He was doing what the whole field does. No one asks. There's no process for asking. A body is found. A culture reached for something evocative and pronounceable, and it's taken. And then we read about it after. There is a piece of indigenous feminist thought that describes something like this, and it's not Inuit. Leanne Betamasoke Simpson is Mishi Saigig Nishnabeg, a writer, a musician, and scholar who works from her own nation's stories and her own nation's territory. She is not Inuit. She does not speak for Inuit people. Her thinking is what I'm using here. The tellings of Sedna in this episode are Inuit from Inuit mouths and recorded on Inuit land. So in a conversation with Naomi Klein in 2013, carried into her book, As We Always Have Done, in 2017, Simpson takes the word extraction away from mining and shows what it is. Extraction and assimilation, she says, go together, and both colonialism and capitalism run on them. The land is a resource. Excuse me, the animals and plants are resources. Culture and knowledge are resources. Bodies are resources. And then the definition, which is the sharpest sentence, extracting is stealing, taking without consent, without thought or care or any knowledge of what the taking does to the other living things in that place. The act of extraction, she says, removes all relationships that give whatever is being extracted its meaning. So if we pull the ore out of the ground, we have ore and we have a whole. Pull the story out of the people and we have an image and we have a whole. So what is left of Sedna in the southern retellings is this striking picture of a dismembered woman under the water. And what is left behind is everything that made her mean something. The obligations, the taboos, the reason that the hunt fails, the descent, the confession, the whole apparatus of a people who understood that eating is a relationship, and the relationship can break and it can be fixed. Simpson also refuses to hand over a tidy moral at the end of the story, and she's explicit about, she says, a story that has been reduced to a lesson has already been processed. It's been made into a resource. So I'm going to tell the story properly and then stop rather than finishing what Sedna means for your life. Who is hungry in the Arctic right now? The story says that when the obligations break, the animals do not come and the people go hungry. So here's where that stands today. Statistics Canada runs a household survey called the Canadian Income Survey, and a research group at the University of Toronto called Proof Analysis analyzes the food insecurity questions. Their figure for 2025 is that 56.4% of people in Nunavut lived in a household that could not reliably afford food it needed. That's more than double the worst province. The number is made by the South, by a national survey, and it counts everybody in the territory, including the government and the mining workers who fly in from elsewhere and are paid very well. So it understates the thing that it is measuring. The Nunavut Food Security Coalition, which is Inuit-led and works the territory, puts the Inuit-specific figure at 76% of Inuit in Nunavut over the age of 15 reporting that their household is food insecure. It is the highest documented rate for any Indigenous population in any wealthy country. And there is a documented case of the numbers done in open on Inuit people in that place within memory. In 1953 and 1955, the Canadian government moved 87 people, 19 families from Inuit in northern Quebec, and 3 from Pond Inlet, 1,200 kilometers north to Resolute Bay and Grise Fjord. They were told that the hunting would be better and they would come home after 2 years if they wanted. There were no buildings waiting. The game was unfamiliar. The dark lasted for months longer than they were used to, and the promise about coming home was broken. Canada paid $10 million into a trust in 1996 and apologized in 2010, and the apology recognized what historians had been saying. Those families held in the high Arctic while Canada made a sovereignty claim. The Arctic is the Arctic is where the taking is the loudest right now. There's ice that's going, there's shipping routes that are opening through water that used to be closed, the mineral interest is rising, and the animals are under pressure. These people, treated like a scenery by everyone who came north to take something, had a fully worked out theory of what happens when you break the relationship with the animals, and they wrote it into their most important story, and everybody kept the picture and then threw the theory away. Now let's go back to the boat. So the women listening to this have all been in the boat. We've all been there. Not in the same way, but we've all been in that boat. And the arithmetic is recognizable at the level of the decision, whoever you are and whatever your life looks like. She is the one who's asked to move cities. She is the one who gets things dropped when her calendar cannot hold both. She is the one who's told that, of course, it is not fair, but she is the reasonable one. She's the flexible one. She can absorb it. She will understand. The last word is the tell. Understanding is what is asked of the person being removed. As you're being tossed out of the boat or as your fingers are being cut off, thanks for being so understanding. Watch also how the cut is dressed, right? It's almost never presented as a loss. It's presented as a solution that she's well placed to provide. She's thanked for it warmly and in front of people. And the thanks is the last that anybody ever talks of it. The gratitude, quote gratitude, does the work of closing the subject. We're so grateful that you were able to do this. By the time that she notices that her fingers are gone, the matter is old business and it looks awkward bringing it up. Why are we still talking about this? She was not chosen because she was weak. She was chosen because she was capable. A camp does not put its most fragile arrangement over the side. It puts the thing it is confident will survive. The woman who gets cut is very often the one everybody privately knows will land on her feet, and that the competence is exactly what gets used against her. Look at what these women do after, right? The Irish civil servants who were made to resign on their wedding day went and built things, and then they organized. And the Commission on the Status of Women that extended the practice in 1973 came out of women who had been on the receiving end of it. The Dutch women pushed for 40 years. None of them got their time back, but all of them changed what happened to women behind them. Here's the pattern with women who go over the side. What her hands made feeds people. What she does after she goes down, changes the water for everyone else, she's not a cautionary story. She's not a wound with a name attached. She is the one from whom the world got fed. And most of the time, no one is at the rail. Most of the time, she just lets go herself. She names the smaller number before anybody has to negotiate her down. She takes herself out of consideration before there's a chance to be turned down. She says that she doesn't mind about the date. She doesn't mind about the room, the credit, the trip. She doesn't mind because she settled the question years ago about what she's worth. She hears that the boat is heavy and she's already moving towards the side to go over herself so that no one has to have the conversation and no one has to see themselves cutting her. You can tell that a woman is doing this because she will describe it as being easygoing or low maintenance. And there's also a story with no father, right? He can be dead or he can be kind or on another continent, and he can have been the one man who never once did that math. It doesn't make a difference because she learned the weight was somewhere else and she carries the number now. The camp taught her. The school taught her. The church taught her. The marriage bar taught her. And once she can do that number and do the math herself, the system doesn't have to. It's the most efficient possible arrangement, and it's why it's so common and why it works so well. And There's a particular loneliness in that version. When someone cuts you off the boat, at least there's some event that you can look to. There's a before and there's an after, right? There's a person who did it, and there's something to be angry about, and then another person can recognize when you describe it. So when you go over on your own, there's nothing to point at. There's no scene, there's no argument, there's no moment that anyone else would remember. It's just a series of small withdrawals over 20 years, each one perfectly reasonable at the time, even expected of us. Each one framed as being, it's fine, it's no trouble, no problem, my pleasure, until the position that we're standing in is so much smaller than the one that we're capable of holding, and we cannot even trace how we got there. I don't want to leave it as a criticism of us, because it's not a flaw, it's a skill that was installed. It's not natural, it was installed. And it was installed because it works. Reading the room, knowing about who is about to be cut, moving first, being able to read a relationship and what's happening. It's intelligence. It's just been aimed at the wrong target for a really long time. And notice what doesn't change either way. The fingers go into the water whether she cuts them up or whether she opens her hand. The sea is fed on the same terms. So everything that comes out of her is out there working. It's feeding people, whether or not anyone wrote down whose hand it came off of. Which means that the abundance and what she has to offer was hers all the time. Not as a consolation for having gone over, but just as a fact about where life comes from. And there's no reconciliation scene in this story. She does not forgive her father. She does not come to understand his position. There's no telling in where she rises back, restored, with her hands whole and the past behind her, ready to be a daughter once again. She does not become nicer. She does not get smaller. The stories that follow her are told by people who are frightened about her, frightened of her, and need her, and she stays down there running the sea. And nothing in the Inuit stories treat this as a defeat. Nothing in the Arctic wrote her ending as a tragedy that a better attitude might have fixed. Maybe if she had a better attitude, she would have been saved. They wrote her as the most powerful being in the world, and then built their ethics around the fact that we owe her. So what's available to her is not healing in the way that it gets sold. It's someone coming down, someone making the trip to where she actually is and doing with their hands what she cannot do with hers, saying out loud what was done and by whom, who did what, and then changing what happens up on top. So presence and hands and truth, but finally change. Every message aimed at women who have been cut points at her, right? Do the inner work, release the resentment, take responsibility for your own peace, find gratitude. The Inuit put the work on the community and the descent on the shaman. So she is not the problem to be solved. She's the condition of everyone's survival, and she is owed a visit. Everything anyone eats comes off her hands. That's the sentence in the middle of the story. How the world is fed in a place where feeding is really hard. Her hair is still tangled with what other people did. She still cannot untangle it. It's still not hers to untangle. It's still not hers to heal her hands and untangle them herself. And the whole story of the entire people was built around the understanding that when the food stops, the question is, what did we break? Instead of what is wrong with her. And I would love for you to hear this. The first is that being the item that comes off the boat doesn't say anything about your worth, and everything about who's holding the knife and what they already decided. And the second thing is what came off your hands is out there right now feeding people, working, whether or not anyone has said so out loud. So the seals are still hers. There was never a question at the bottom of the sea.